What's up, guys, and welcome back, and I'm just going to get right into it. We're going to be recapping the Pittsburgh Steelers versus Cleveland Browns game that took place last night on Monday Night Football, and it is going to be an analysis of the game, but before I get started, I just want to thank Ben Roethlisberger for all that he's done for this organization, for the city, for the fans, for his family, his friends, really just everything in his life, every aspect of it. I just thank him because he spent almost half of his life in the city of Pittsburgh playing football for us for 18 years, sacrificing his body. And there are a lot of fans that'll say maybe he should have won more Super Bowls, and I can understand that argument considering how consistently good our team was. But the worst record he's ever given us is 8-8. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. Ben Roethlisberger's never had a losing season, and it doesn't seem to matter what's thrown this man's way. He plays hard. It doesn't matter what his limitations are. He's going to give it your all. So to that, I thank Ben. And what we saw last night was really just a beautiful thing. One of the most beautiful things I think I've ever seen when it comes to the sports world. And we'll talk about it a little bit more later. But we're going to get into actual analysis first. And the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to take home a 26-14 lead in a win. Granted, that extra touchdown, although it did seal the game, it was really a one-score game, but on the scoreboard, 26-14 was the final score. Najee Harris passed Franco Harris for the single-season rookie rushing record for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had 188 yards on over 20 carries last night. Very impressive for him. Definitely his best game in the pros. And what really stands out to me is J.C. Hassenberger, or whatever his name is, J.C. Hassenbauer. So his name's something like that. He was the center for the Steelers today. Kendrick Green was out. And I can't help but wonder, this offensive line actually looked competent today. I think they allowed one sack on the entire day. And this was definitely the best blocking that Najee Harris has had all year long, and it's against players like Myles Garrett, Sheldon Richardson, Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, where did this come from? And yes, Kendrick Green isn't the only problem on the offensive line. It easily could have been a fluke game, but just the fact that he left and the offensive line looks so much better. Keep in mind, the center's the core of the offensive line. It's in the dead middle. It really stands out to me. And personally, I would like to see what happens, and I obviously wish Green well on his recovery. I hope he is well soon. But in terms of like what's happening on the field, I would be interested to see what would happen if JC plays next week against Baltimore too. Because if Kendrick Green's one of the problems on the offensive line, granted he's a rookie, but it looked much, much better today. Najee Harris, stellar performance, stiff-arming people, bulldozing through people. You could tell he was playing for this team, he was playing for Ben, and he really embodies what it means to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. And then the other side of the line of scrimmage, the defensive line, they were lights out all day long, batting balls from Baker Mayfield. TJ Watt telling Baker, you better throw it higher because we're batting these balls down like it's none of your business. TJ Watt batting it down. Henry Mondu batting it down. Cameron Hayward batting it down. Mayfield could do absolutely nothing, and granted, he's not that great of a quarterback, but he couldn't even get the ball off, and this is supposedly one of the best offensive lines in the league. Now, when it comes to the Browns' game plan, I can't help but wonder why they only ran the ball, I think it was 12 times with Nick Chubb. To me, that's absolutely embarrassing. You have Nick Chubb, you have Kareem Hunt, and you have D'Ernest Johnson. I don't know if Hunt was available, but I didn't see him much in the game, if it was either Chubb or Johnson, so I'm going to assume Hunt wasn't able to play like he was most of this year. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but you have one of, if not the best rushing attacks, you have a stellar offensive line, and you throw the ball with a quarterback you know is a liability to your team. I don't get that by Kevin Stefanski's game planning at all. I don't understand why the offensive coordinator's calling the plays that they're playing for the Browns, but with that being said, nevertheless, on the passing game, the Browns could do absolutely nothing. And the thing that I've realized, too, is Nick Chubb, he's only really had 2 big runs in his career against the Steelers. It was last year against the Steelers, JV squad, whenever they were resting their starters, and one today that went for about 35 yards. But other than that, Steelers have shut down the Browns' rushing attacks that so many defenses have struggled to stop, and it's very impressive. It's almost like it's a systemic thing with this team. Now, yes, granted, they lost in the playoffs last year. All it took was the worst first quarter and the worst quarter overall in playoff history, basically, for them to do that. All the Browns really had to do was sit there and watch the Steelers stumble on their own 2 feet and hit themselves with a rake that they accidentally stepped on. So, with that in mind, you have to remember that this Ben Roethlisberger, he is 25-3-1 against the Browns. in his career. He's played since 2004. He has lost 3 times. Up until this year, he had the most wins in the Cleveland Browns Stadium until Baker Mayfield finally broke it this year. That is how dominant this Pittsburgh Steelers team has been over the Browns. You can tell it's in their head. You can tell that he's in their head, and yes, I understand Baker's not a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. At times he can be good, but he's just not great overall. But we were in his head. TJ, 4 sacks. He has 21.5 sacks, 1 sack to tie the record, 1.5 sacks or more to beat the single season sack record. And I really believe he can do it. He had around 3 sacks against the Ravens last time we played. He's going to be hungry, but we can't have that be the number one thing in our mind. The number one thing in our mind is winning. Team achievements, team success over player achievements and player success. That's how I am all day long. Obviously, I'm rooting for TJ to get that because he really deserves it. And keep in mind, he's missed 3 or 4 games this year, and there's been a lot of games where he's been out for a quarter, he's been out for a half, and he still is this dominant. If TJ Watt does not win Defensive Player of the Year, I don't even think I'm biased by saying this. He's the Defensive Player of the Year. If you don't give it to him, there's something wrong with that. You can argue we should have had the past 2 years, especially last year. This year, it is his award. I don't care what happens the rest of the way. I don't care if someone has 9 sacks in one game somehow. TJ Watt will be the Defensive Player of the Year. Put it on your calendars. Go to the NFL honors ceremony. He will win Defensive Player of the Year. This Steelers defensive line had 9 sacks. 9. Utter domination on a defensive line. What I love about this Steelers team is sometimes they go out there and they look like they don't show heart, but they showed some heart tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I will tell you that. They were playing for Ben. They were playing for playoff aspirations, even though not all of it is in their control, even though the majority is, because obviously they have to win Baltimore next week. Hope that Jacksonville loses, and do keep in mind the Colts have not won in Jacksonville since 2014, but obviously the Colts are favored. I'd favor them to win. And as an honest NFL fan, I think the Colts will win. I'm obviously rooting for otherwise. Because let's just say, for the purpose of Ben Roethlisberger's story, that the Steelers beat the Ravens, but the Jaguars lose. Ben would have won his last 2 games, and he would have done all he could. And in my opinion, that's all you could ask from the man. That's a good send-off. But even if Ben loses and the Jaguars win, which would absolutely suck, but even if the Steelers were to lose, and I don't think they will, but even if the Steelers do lose in Baltimore, and the Colts do lose to Jacksonville, what else can you want? What we saw on our television was poetic. We saw Ben walking around, he's crying, his family's hugging him, and he walks off into the locker room. Like that's just some real stuff right there. That's more than sports. Right? That's a player's life. You watch this dude grow up. This is his family, and he all started it in this city. And it's just really, it's like emotional to even think about, because what this man has done, what this man is continuing to do, and just how his life has revolved around the city of Pittsburgh for the last 18 years. That's where his family was built. That's where, the good times and the bad were built. He won us 2 Super Bowls, took us to 3. I mean, you cannot say enough about what Ben Roethlisberger has done. So even if the Steelers do lose, obviously I hope they don't, but at the end of the day, what we saw is one of the best send-offs ever. One of the best send-offs ever. It's up there with Kobe Bryant. That's how amazing it was. But like I was saying, the Steelers' defensive line, utter domination. Henry Mondu was getting in there. I mean, Tusky was getting in there. Just Watt, Hayward, Alex Highsmith had a great game. They played amazing. Joe Hayden, and also potentially his last game at Heinz Field, former Brown as well. He could have played better, but at the end of the day, it didn't matter. Ahkello Witherspoon, extend that man, re-sign him for next year, because he is playing very, very, very well. I'm excited to see what we have in him as a slot corner. Trey Norwood also got an interception, and just imagine this. Steelers are up 19-14. Ben hands the ball off. They need a first down to win. Najee breaks a tackle, runs into the end zone for a touchdown. Right? Sure, it's not like Ben threw a game-winning touchdown as time expired, but that is really poetic. Ben steps off the field. Baker Mayfield steps on the field. And Baker Mayfield being Baker Mayfield, and the Steelers' defense and team overall having the heart that they had yesterday. Trey Norwood picks off a pass. In any other game, this would be meaningless, but he picks off a pass from Baker Mayfield to give Ben one last snap, one kneel, because he never got to kneel down. Some people might be thinking, Najee, why'd you run the end zone? Let Ben kneel it out. Well, you can argue that, but at the end of the day, it didn't matter what Najee Harris did, because Ben got to go back on that field and he got to kneel. And that's poetic. That's from a movie. That seems like something from Hollywood, and we watched it on our screens. I wish I had the privilege to watch it with my own two eyes at the game, because if there's any Steelers game I would want to be at in my life, it would be that game. That would be the game. I don't care what other games I've watched. That would be the game that I would want to be at, because the way Ben was honored, it was like you were losing a best friend, and it's just really emotional. The Steelers played with so much heart. That is the most heart I've ever seen this team play with, ever. And you can't replicate that feeling. You can't replicate that emotion. You can't replicate what happened on the field. None of those things you're going to see again. You see it once. And we are so privileged to have watched that game. The Steelers, Deontay Johnson, we're going to talk about the receiving corps. Chase Claypool was disappointing. Didn't have a single reception. Deontay Johnson, he's had a great season this year, but he dropped some passes that I was surprised that he dropped. He looked like his 2020 self, and I do think that he fixed his drop problem. Hopefully, I hope that continues to happen, because I'm going to say it's just one game. But the past 2 weeks, he could have played better these past 2 weeks, but I think he'll get back on track. I have confidence in Deontay. And just to see all these players, Juju, I know he's not playing, but Juju making posts about Ben, talking about Ben, James Harrison, Willie Parker, Brett Kiesel, all these former players, even Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell had something to say about Ben Roethlisberger. Le'Veon, granted, he didn't have a beef with Ben, but AB did. And I think what he realized is that Ben has grown up. Originally, he was that rock star quarterback. He had all these accusations against him, and you can believe what you want about those. They're terrible things. They're terrible things to be accused of. Whether he actually did it or not, you can't legally prove. But obviously, people have formed their opinions, as have I. But he was the rock star quarterback, and I really think whether he did it or not, that situation that he was in really changed his life. He was addicted to so much. He was just really just a human being that you would not want to be, other than all of the money that he was getting, all the fame that he was getting. But now when you look at Ben, it's like you're an older brother, It's like a dad figure, kind of. I mean, he's a completely changed man. I know I don't know him personally, but you can just tell. You could tell by the tears in his eyes. You could tell by how humble he is. You can tell by how he speaks on his past with regret, but he also is triumphant knowing that he is the man he is today. You can look at the family that he's built. You can look at all that he's done for the city of Pittsburgh. You can look at the way his attitude has changed, his tone has changed. And I think AB has realized that, because Ben wasn't really that awesome of a teammate, especially, when it comes towards his wide receivers, up until I'd say about 2019. And granted, he was injured, so really just last year. Because Brown is not a role model, right? Great receiver, not a role model. He's made mistakes. He made mistakes with them Steelers, but Ben was overly criticizing his receivers, and he doesn't do that anymore. He's learned from so much in his life. He's learned from the wrongs that he's done, or the wrongs that he's been accused of doing in some cases, and he has made himself a better person from that. The person that he is today, compared to who he was 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, completely different person. Obviously, there's resemblances of how Ben used to look to how he is now, obviously, because he is the same person technically. But in terms of his personality, those are two completely different people, and I'm so proud of him for that. So you can say whatever you want about Ben. You could say, I won't honor someone who did those things if you have that opinion. But he is a changed man, and if he did end up doing those things, it's not an excuse. They're horrible things. But you should get applauded for being a changed man. He is a different person now than what he was, regardless of if he did that or not. He is a better person now. And it's really something that I think is truly inspiring. We can all learn from Ben Roethlisberger in this situation, because, that is my quarterback. I know what Terrell Owens said about Tony Romo, but that is my quarterback. What I saw, it's like the last so many years in my life. It just led up, right? All of these times when I'm so excited to watch Ben play and tear it up with Brown and Bella, and they're gone. except you can just look at Ben, and you're so excited to watch Ben play. That's the only quarterback you've ever known. And to see it be his last home game and him be remembered like that, it's truly something special. It's something that's special. And I don't care what is flowing out of my eyes right now, because Ben Roethlisberger really means something to me, because he it's I've always been excited to watch this team. I've always known that this team's had a fighting chance. I knew it this year when they were 1-3 and looked dead in the water. I knew that come week 18, week 17, they'd still at least have a shot, because Ben Roethlisberger is on this team. Mike Tomlin's the head coach, and just because so many things about this team. Yes, I understand. They do. It's been disappointing in the playoffs. It's been disappointing not making it sometimes. But at the end of the day, the success that the Steelers team has had since Ben Roethlisberger's been there is something that you only really have seen with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. But even still, that's to a lesser degree. The only real comparison I can think of is Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, because it's just been such long-term success for so many years. He will never have a losing season. Ben Roethlisberger will never have a losing season in his career with this win. He will never have a season where he has lost to the Cleveland Browns twice. He'll never have a season where he hasn't made us proud, where he hasn't performed the best he can, where he hasn't given the city his all. And it's just truly amazing, because to see this man change, to see this man perform the way he used to perform, and I still think he's a decent quarterback now. It is time for him to go. It's for the better of him and for the franchise. But that doesn't mean that it's not sad to see him go. He's the only quarterback I've ever known for this team. I've always been so excited to watch this team. He's part of the reason why I love this game so much, why I'm recording this video right now. In a sense, he's part of the reason why. You have Ben Roethlisberger to thank for that. And just to see him be honored the way he was and all the emotion, I can't help but get emotional myself. And the Steelers, they're still alive. They need a win in Baltimore and a Jacksonville win. But even if Jacksonville doesn't win and the Steelers win, or both lose, or somehow the Steelers lose and Jacksonville wins, which is probably the least likely scenario to happen, then I can't I I can't be sad about that. Because from what I just saw, that was the season. You don't get that again, and it's really something special. Go Steelers.